Hello, and welcome to today's Augustana Human Library session. The title of today's Human Book is A Phone Call Away, and this is the Human Book's abstract. In 2011, the Syrian revolution separated me from my freedom, my school, my family and friends, my home and my country. I lived for several years with no view of the future, except to live day by day and hope for things to change. In 2015, I received a phone call to meet with a Canadian woman who ended up changing my life. She made a short video about me, and she sponsored me to come to Canada. Today I am in Canada. I have new friends, a new family, a new school, a freedom that I never dreamed of having. Thank you all for being here today, and welcome A Phone Call Away.
Thank you, Nancy. And hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. It's very exciting to be back at the Human Library. And although it's virtual, I do love Augustana and to be there in person. I was just telling Nancy how charming I think it is, and hopefully we'll be able to visit again in the future. And yeah, my name is Tarek, and the story is called A Phone Call Away. I'm a Syrian refugee living in Turner Valley, Alberta, working in Black Diamond, Alberta. It doesn't really sound very, you don't hear those Syrian refugee Black Diamond. I think I might be the only Syrian refugee to settle in Turner Valley, Black Diamond, which is wonderful. And I'm so lucky to be able to do that. And you'll learn through the story how that came to happen. I still can't believe it myself. So I told part of my story when I came a few years back to Augustana about how I left home, which is Syria. My home country is Syria after the war, and how I happened to come to Canada. But I'm not sure who was there and who's not. So I'll start over and give you some background and how this happened. So the whole story started in 2011 when the war in Syria started. I was, a student back in Syria and Damascus, Syria, and when the war started, we were uncertain. There were a lot of protests and a lot of very peaceful protests. So we thought it's going to be just a little, wave of what's called the Arab Spring back in the days that's going to pass by, that we will be okay. After that, things escalated. We wouldn't be able to do many things that we were doing. We noticed that there's a lot of shooting during protests. We noticed that there's a lot of a lot of people dying on daily basis. And just life took a huge shift that we were not used to. I know that the Middle East is, there's been war in the area, but as far as Syria goes, we never really have seen war in our life. This was the first time we see any conflict in our lives, and that was kind of surprising and shocking and scary, terrifying. So things kind of went, in 2011, 2012, things would go up and down, would calm down for a while, and then would spike up again. And we were not sure who to support and who we if we should protest with someone or if not, because there's no clear cut on it. The war doesn't really, both sides don't really represent us. One side is representing some radical ideas and the other side is representing some radical government ideas, and both of them don't really speak to what we want as citizens. We just want, none of that. We want our lives back. So it was a bit problematic to live through the war. And I remember days when we would go to school in the morning and we would see, sometimes blood, sometimes on occasions bodies, and you have to kind of ignore them and just keep going and go to school. So at a certain point, it became dangerous. And the last thing that happened that made us flee home was that they asked for any males between the age of 18 and 50, I believe, or 55 to be taken to the army. And, as I said, you're not taking sides, you're not fighting on either side. So I chose not to fight with anyone and I chose to leave and to go to Jordan. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. So speaking a bit more about the war, is that I personally when I was growing up, I grew up in a Muslim family, as Syria is a Muslim country. But I also kind of adopted this different mentality. I was personally myself a secular person. I didn't believe, like, I kind of read my way through things, and I did a lot of research, and I kind of left my religion when I was younger. I was 14. So, the fact that I was living in a Muslim country was also, the cause partly was led by radical Muslims, or what they call ISIS or Free Army, or whatever you want to call them. So there were a lot of factors that were dangerous on myself personally. Is that, you have the war, and you have a few armies fighting, and you don't really belong to any of them. And so it was time to leave, especially after one time I was with my family, and we were on a bus, and I've always had a beard since I was maybe 14. I had a beard. So they stopped the bus, and they looked at me, and they saw the beard, and the beard is considered part of, a symbol for those who are fighting or something or other that was happening at the time. And they kind of took me aside, and they were slapping me on the face and saying, why do you have the beard on? And who are you supporting, and who are you with? And that's when my dad said to me, well, it's time to go. So I, went to Jordan. I was, I think, 17 or 18. Before leaving, we were living in the suburbs of Damascus. And before leaving, my dad said, well, let's go home one more time, so you can pick up whatever you want from home, because we're probably going to be gone from home for about a month or two until the war ends. A month or two, he says, thinking that the war is going to evaporate in a month or two. Little did he know that it's ongoing. So we did go back to our home in the suburbs of Damascus. And one thing that I realized, as a 17 years old, walking into my home that's kind of partly destroyed at the time, there were a lot of bullets that we saw on the floor, and a lot of, marks that were not ours. A lot of things are stolen. My dad said, okay, don't take too many things, take the things that are essential. And it kind of struck me for the first time that you look around yourself in a room, in my room, and I thought, well, everything is so valuable at this moment, including my sister's teddy bear that I thought, oh, I want to take that to her. I want my violin. I want the photographs. I want my favorite shirt. So everything all of a sudden becomes very valuable. And you have this fear of regretting not taking this, but that. And, I took my violin at the end because I kind of was learning how to play violin, and I didn't want to lose that. And I took a picture of my mom that was, under my dresser. So I hid it because I didn't want anyone to see it or take it away from me. And before we were able to gather all of our stuff, there were a lot of bombing. So my dad said, oh, it's time to hit the road. And we left. And then we lived by Lebanon's border for a while because, a relative had a farmhouse there. It was relatively safer than the rest of the country. So we were able to seek refuge there while the war was happening. Of course, that's, when I said earlier, a few minutes ago, I plan to go to Jordan. As a Syrian, there's a lot of complications that comes with traveling. When you have a Syrian passport, it's not like having any other passport, because no countries want you. You need a million visa and a few permissions, and you have to seek some, convince the army that you're not, there's no warrants against you or anything. So it's not as simple as go to the border and you cross the border. So we were in the process of figuring out, how can I leave the country? What's going to happen to school, because I was in school at the time, and what's going to happen to those who I'm leaving behind, like my dad, my stepmom, and all that. So we lived by the Lebanon border in a farmhouse that belongs to my aunt. And life was, relatively speaking, more peaceful. At times it was scary, at times it wasn't. We were not able to see a lot of family members for a long time. And the war was still happening. And we still had no idea how long it's going to take and when it's going to end. And we had no idea, which side are we on. Some days we did take sides, as everyone would get passionate and say, well, those, free army or those governments, that or the other. But deep down, we really cared less about the cause that they're fighting for, because it wasn't really a clear cause. It was just fighting over power, over religion. Religion had a big part to do with it, because, as you might know, Islam has 5 sectors, and there's Sunni Shia, and there's Durzi, and there's Yazidi, and there's the fifth one is escaping me, Alawi, the fifth one. So it was 2 of those fighting, and some of those took sides with the others, and we were kind of not really taking sides with that, and it's just over land and power. The other part of it is that it was becoming more dangerous for even dad, for my sister. My sister, was harassed a few times by the army, because, when there's no law and order, things kind of go out of hand, and every situation, every check stop becomes dangerous. If you're driving 60 kilometers, you're going to be stopped 10 times, and you're going to be asked 100 questions, to the point where, to give you an example, I remember, when I carry my laptop with me, if I'm leaving, I have to kind of swift through the laptop and make sure there's nothing that they can find on the laptop that would give them any evidence on me. Not that I did anything, but, if there's a picture of the president on the laptop, depending on which side catches you, they might say, oh, so you support him. So we had to kind of look at our phones and our laptops before we leave. I had to shave my beard before leaving, so that there's no symbols. I'm not really trying to look like anyone. And things, yes, things were not were not good at all. And at the time, I was trying to continue to work. I worked I worked in a lady shoe store, so I kind of co-owned it at the time. And I was trying to get to and from work, because also there's the fact that nobody's working, and life is hard. You need to buy your essential things to live. So working with support the family a little bit was necessary. So I was working, at the lady shoe store, and I had to give that up on a night, and it was the 7th of July 2012. It was a lockdown day, and I remember going to work, which was in the lady shoe store, and I didn't know that it's a lockdown day, so I went to work anyway, because we had, relatively speaking, no electricity for days on end. It would the electricity, we have it about an hour every day. So I had to work on the 7th of July 2012, and on my way to work, I would notice that there's a lot of these men that wearing masks that you see on TV. And I kind of asked the bus driver, I said, what is going on? And he said, well, today is the lockdown day, and there's going to be a lot of fighting. And I'm already far away from home, about maybe 40 kilometers. So, because we lived in a farmhouse, so it's quite a bit far away. So I thought I would go to the store and just stay in and not leave until the fighting is over. As I'm locking my store, unlocking the store and entering, someone stopped the car, and it was one of the ISIS or Free Army, and they said, what are you doing here? And I said, this is my store, and I'm coming to work today. And they said, well, today is lockdown day, so close the store and don't open. Nobody's opening. And I said, okay. And they took my name just because. And so I was, I kind of start locking up and wanted to leave, and another car parked, and it was the government. And they said, what the hell are you doing? And I said, I'm locking because nobody's open, and it seems like, it's not going to be a busy day. And they said, well, you're going to have to work today. So open the store up, and you're going to have to operate, because we don't want you to support the lockdown. And they also took my name. So kind of, damn if you do, damn if you don't. So I kind of kept one door open and one door closed, and I hid in the back until the shooting became a bit too much, that I obviously locked the store and I stayed inside. I had no food, no nothing. And I was just waiting for a chance to get some food, even no water. And back home, water is not drinkable. So you have to, buy water in some areas of the country. So I think it was 7 p.m. when the call for prayers went. And usually during the call of prayer, things calm down, because the Free Army, or, usually the army is praying. So at 7 p.m., I unlocked the store. I called a friend and he said to me, well, come over, I have some food. And he lives about maybe 10 minutes walk. And I remember it was probably the scariest walk I've ever took in my life. I remember like I would put my finger here and can't see my fingers, so dark. The only thing you can see is the snipers on the roofs. And what you see from them is their cigarette. You know how when you take a whiff of your cigarette, it lights up? That's the only light I can see is these cigarettes on the roofs, some of them even, not all of them. So I kind of walked by the wall, by the stores, to head to my friend's shop. He was a barber. And I kind of had my hands up in the air, so I'm not, obviously not armed or anything, but not too high, so I'm not surrendering. It's kind of, that's what they taught me, saying just leave them in front of you. And I took the walk, and it took so long, and it's it felt like forever. And I can, remember it vividly, every second of it, until I made it to my friend's store, and I had some food. And it's just, I wanted to share that with you because it was something that I think of probably on a weekly basis. It's not something that happens to every 17 years old, nor it should. So anyway, after that, there was no work. Obviously, I quit work, and I thought, it's too dangerous to start going to work again for a while, at least. And I'm so thankful that I did that, because after a few weeks after that, the store that I was managing got a rocket inside of it, and it's burned to pieces. So, I went to check the damages, and, there was nothing left, not even a nail in the wall. So I would walk in, and it's just this black hole in the wall. So I'm thankful that I didn't stay, because I used to sleep there sometimes when I'm not able to go home, and, I could have been there. So that was wise to leave work. And I'm glad I listened to my dad when he said that I should. After that, I went to, I would stay at the farmhouse. Life was a bit difficult because, we're not working, we're staying in, and things are getting only more expensive. Pardon my email there. Things are only getting more expensive, and it's more and more dangerous. At one point, even at the farmhouse, which was again by the Lebanon border, we realized at night that we had some people on the property with us that were from the army, and they were, we hid inside the house, and we closed all the doors. And I remember until today, my dad standing by the door, and he had a saw, and he was, standing by the door shaking, and had the saw in his hand. And I was thinking to myself that, what's the saw going to do, Dad? Like, there are people with guns out there. But of course, fight or flight, I guess it's the instinct kicking. So also the situation at the farmhouse was getting really dangerous, and we just didn't know where to go. And Jordan was the only obvious option. So I went to Jordan in 2013, at the beginning of 2013, and I stayed there for a few months. I, worked as a door-to-door marketing. It was the only job I can find. Didn't really pay very well. Syrians were not allowed to work in Jordan, because they kind of said in Jordan that Syrians are only allowed to work the minimum wage jobs, or the jobs that, that's just the jobs that Jordanians are not willing to do. They treated us very well in terms of citizens, with people to people. It was, we were treated, relatively speaking, well enough. But when it comes to jobs, there were some discriminations. And so I thankfully didn't ended up in the camp, where refugee camp, because that's a whole different story. You can't really leave the camp if you're after the camp. I had, we gathered some money, and I was able to go to live in the city with some relatives and friends. And my mom was living there at the time, so that helped too. But after a while, I had to go back home to Syria, because I was 18 and the military paperwork was due, and I was supposed to go to military. Now, in the Middle East, in Syria particularly, there's a rule that says that every male has to go to the army, except if they are a single male for their parents, which played well for me because I'm a single male from my parents, which was great. But I have to go and prove it. And I have to go and prove it every 3 years until either my mom is my mom is 50 or my dad is 60. You have to keep proving every 3 years that my mom and dad still don't have kids. Mom is, and until she gets 50, and she wasn't at the time. So I had to go back home to prove it. Otherwise, they might, take my dad or something just out of punishment. So I went back home again and did military paperwork and stayed for a few months thinking maybe the situation will get better. Maybe it will get better. Maybe we'll go back home at some point, which would be really nice. But, we heard from friends and relatives that, our home is basically demolished at this point and that there's no really point in waiting or in trying anymore. And, the country didn't really feel like it's ours anymore too, which was a bit, very, very sad, not a bit sad, very sad. And you kind of realize, well, I don't have anything left here to stay for. So again, went back to Jordan. And I stayed in Jordan for a good 4 years. I worked in a restaurant because, as I said, we're allowed to work only the minimum wage thing. So I worked in a restaurant. I would mop the floors, wipe the tables, do all the things, which nothing wrong with that, of course. But after a while, I got promoted to be a manager. But it was, you're the manager of the restaurant. But if the government walks in, just say the manager is gone for lunch or something or on vacation. You never, because you're Syrian and you have a Syrian ID that they gave me, that's a refugee ID that says, work permit that's only allowed to work 10-minute minimum wage jobs or whatever it is. So I was a manager and then I became like a regional manager for the store. And I was doing, not bad actually, except for the fact that I can't go to university in Jordan because university was, as refugees, we were charged the international student fees. And I, of course, couldn't afford the international student fees. So there was no ability to do that. Syrians were not allowed to drive. So you're not allowed to obtain a license or to even get your Syrian license to work in Jordan. So a lot of things were kind of stripped away. Is that, a way of saying you're here for a temporary period. And, when you're ready, you need to go home. And then, the wonderful thing happened. A phone call away is the title of the human book. And that's when the phone call came my way. So I got a phone call. I was, already 4 years in Jordan or 3 years and a half at the time. And I got a phone call from one of the people I worked with at the restaurant. And he said, well, there's this Canadian woman and she is, she's doing interviews with Syrians just to hear about them. Would you be willing to do an interview? And I said, yes, by all means, bring her over, gave him my address and they came over. I thought that it's going to be just, CBC, whatever it is, like someone with a magazine and they're writing a little article for some blog or some magazine. I didn't know that it's going to be a short film. So she came with cameras, with interpreters and with huge things that they kind of reflect the light on you so that you look, whatever it is. So it was pretty cool, but pretty scary, So she was wonderful. She is the CEO of something called the Calgary Center for Global Community, which still exists in Calgary. And I encourage you to look it up. The organization goes under the name of Humanology. So that person did an interview with me in Calgary. And, for the first time, I was able to voice everything I want because there's no fear. They're not Jordanians, they're not Syrians, these are Canadians. And these are the people who, have empathy for us, which was wonderful that I can say whatever I want in terms of my suffering. I don't have to kind of guess which side she's on, so I don't mess up. So I told her my story and she filmed it. I asked her not to show my face because I was afraid that if I said anything that would upset anyone back home in terms of armies, that they might take revenge from my dad, who was still there because I was there on my own. I was there with my sister, pardon me. So she showed the back of my head and she didn't put my name on it. Even she changed my name. She said, choose a name. And, I played guitar for her at the time in the movie. Like she said, what do you like to do? And I said, I like playing guitar. And I got to tell her everything about my beliefs, about my religious beliefs that, has always been weighing on me that I never really told anyone back home about them. And she was very empathetic, and she would, every time she talks to me, she would cry even. That was very touching. Well, not every time, maybe I'm exaggerating, but she cried quite a bit. Um, and then she left to Canada, and I left while they were in the airplane. She and her and the videographer that came with her, I wrote them a poem in English. My English was not very good. It was okay. It was, I would pass. I would be able to have a conversation. So I wrote them a poem. The poem was bad, but it was cute, right? So I mean, it's just it's non-speaking English person trying their best to, voice their emotions. So I still have it, and I don't have it handy, but it's pretty cute. And we stayed in touch, and we would talk every maybe couple of days. And she would ask me how are things and if anything changes, and if anything changed, and I said no. And then she said, "Do you want to come to Canada?" Which wasn't really the intention of the meeting. The intention of the meeting was to do this movie series that she was doing. She did it with a bunch of people. Like I think she did about 15 films when she was in the Middle East. So the intention was just to meet people and to do this project. And it was called Under an Umbrella We Met. And the subtitle was In My Shoes. So the idea was similar to the First Nation idea of walk a mile in my shoes. Is that you're going to watch my movie as a refugee, you're going to wear my shoes. But she forgot to take my shoes, so I had to ship it. So I took shoes and I shined them up and I shipped them in DHL to Canada, which was bizarre but fun. So she said, "Do you want to come to Canada?" And I said, "Of course I want to come to Canada." Like, Canada has always been, one of those countries that we hear great things about. I have family who lived in Ottawa for about 40 years now. So, they always come from Canada and they tell us all the good things about Canada. And I've, as a person living in a third world, it's called the third world. We'll call it that for now. As a person who living in the third world, moving to Canada was a dream, regardless of the war. So with a war, we really needed just to leave to a country where we can be human beings that can do the basic human being things. So I didn't, I kind of wanted to go anywhere that I can do that. But Canada was one of the top options. And what's amazing that it came my way. So the sponsor said to me, "We can sponsor you personally to come to Canada. It's not like, government sponsorship." She said, "But you have to think about it because it gets up down to -40 here." She said, "So when you come here, you have to realize that Canada is a bit different. And so you have 1 hour to think about it. I'm headed to a board meeting right now. And you can tell me after an hour whether you want to come or not." Now I knew that, and she took a picture actually of her window, her house. It was snowing, and she said, "Here's what Canada looks like. It's going to be snowing always in Calgary, so in the winter. So are you okay with that?" And I need, I needed to confirm that you are, because I don't want you regretting your decision coming here. And for me, it was a no-brainer that to say yes, say yes. But I waited an hour and I did the dance, and I told her when she arrived to her meeting that I'm pretty sure I want to come to Canada. And it was me alone, which because she only knew me. So that it was more tricky, because a single male coming alone to Canada from Syria is not as easy of a process, because they tend to be more dangerous category, as they say. Single male is the most dangerous category, and I filled that category, but it worked out. So she had her board meeting, and I met with the people who were from organization on the board. She put me on camera on Skype, and I got to talk to them a little bit. They told me the conceptual, idea behind the organization. I didn't understand a lot of it. I kind of grasped on the idea because my English was still minimal. And I told them who I am and my thoughts and what I do in Jordan and why I want to leave. And I think it was pretty obvious for the most part. I mean, everyone wanted to leave. So we waited quite a bit, actually. Well, a year and a month from the time I talked to her until the time I got to Canada, which was, relatively speaking, these days, it's not really a lot to get here. it is a lot when you think about it that you can book a ticket with your passport and go anywhere you want. But nonetheless, I'm privileged to be here. So I came to Canada, and now we're going to jump to the part where I arrived in Black Diamond. So I lived in Canada. As soon as I arrived, of course, or even before I arrived to Canada, I met some of the kindest people online that were part of that organization that said to me, when you come to Canada, we're going to host you at our home until you find your feet. And you're welcome to stay with us for as long as you want. So when I got here, there were these 25 people at the airport with a big sign that says, "Welcome to Canada." And, donuts, they brought Tim Horton donuts just to, do the proper welcome, and flowers, and a bottle of water because it's dry here, and a lip chop, and all the things that you need in Canada. And even like a ketchup chips that's very famous in Canada, apparently, or was at the time. So anyway, they did the most amazing welcome party. And I just, as soon as I arrived, because it's not really easy. I was 22 at the time, I think, or 23. And moving alone across the world wasn't really, easy. I was sort of thinking to myself, where am I going? I'm going to be sleeping in someone's basement tonight, and I have no idea who they are except for through camera. Of course, they were very comforting and wonderful, but still, it's a big move. So I arrived in Canada on April 24th, 2017. I came from home wearing a t-shirt, and in Canada in April, it was snowing. And I remember being with a bunch of Syrians at the airplane, because a few Syrians were coming to Edmonton, actually, not to Calgary, but they were landing in Calgary first and taking another plane. And we all looked from the window, and here comes the surprise, is that it snows here in April. So it was kind of a bit of a shock, but we adapted very quickly. So arriving the first night, I saw that the people I stayed with, I don't think they mind if I said that, their names are Chris and Dirk. And, Chris and Dirk, I stayed with them, and they had a schedule for me where they want to take me. And it was, very adorable. The first day we're going to go to Banff, and the second day we're going to go to Grassy Lakes, and the third day we're going to go to Crossroads Market or whatever it is. So they had like a full schedule, and we want to take him here and there. And the seventh day was to go to Black Diamond, which is, I wouldn't be able to tell any of these areas on a map even, but anyway, it was delightful. And on the seventh day, we, of course, we did all the things. We went to the mountains, and we went here and there, and they would make me the Middle Eastern breakfast in the morning just to make me feel at home. So the first night I woke up and I found that they had a Syrian traditional breakfast, and songs even that one of my favorite singers, the Middle Eastern singer, just, over the top, above and beyond, wonderful people that's really helped a lot. I think it would be quite different if it was someone else different than them. So after a week, they said we're going to drive an hour to go see some gallery in the south called Blue Rock Gallery in Black Diamond. And, art wasn't a priority in Syria. You might have guessed that already, but, people weren't really, we did have artists, of course, everywhere there are artists, but we didn't have the privilege, or, we didn't have artwork on our walls, not even plants, because all of that was secondary. We were barely able to get food at times. So to go to an art gallery, and, it was delightful, wonderful. I walked in, and the gallery is amazing. Blue Rock Gallery, if you haven't been, it's a pretty spectacular place. And yeah, so I got to know this, beautiful gallery in Black Diamond, Alberta. And then as soon as I arrived here, I wanted to work, because I've noticed that online, a lot of Global Calgary did an interview with me, a couple of them, and a lot of the comments online were very negative about, like, you're coming here to live off our tax money or do this or that. And I was very motivated to work all the same, but that even made me more motivated, is that I don't want to live anyone's tax money. I want to contribute. So I worked for the first year. I worked in a Starbucks, actually. And, I lived downtown Calgary. I was very happy, content. And then I was asked by the gallery owner here through some friends and connections that she wanted me to work here temporarily during Christmas time to cover for, to help them out. And at the same time, Nancy from the Global Library, from the Human Library, asked me to go to Augustana and give a talk at the Human Library annual celebration. So I was considering going back to university and going to Camrose. I love the small town, and I think I did like Camrose quite a bit, but I think also it's the charm of the Augustana that drew me more so than anything else, because I didn't really see the town more. I saw more of the university, and of course Nancy was a big factor because she's delightful. So I applied for university. Nancy was a great help, and everyone there actually were wonderful help. I applied for university in Camrose, and I kind of got accepted. They said, "Oh, we're ready." And I remember I took a walk with Nancy to the dorms even, and she showed me where I can stay. And she said, maybe in a year or two, you'll be the RA even. And we planned everything out. And I went back to Black Diamond, and I gave my notice to leave the gallery, Blue Rock Gallery, where I was working temporarily. But then the previous owner of the gallery, kind of said to me, well, I've been dreaming or seeing shapes that you're going to be the new owner of the gallery. And for me, that was like out of, nothing that I've ever dreamed of course. How would you? Why would you? And it took me kind of a few days to adjust and think about it seriously. And I had a few days that I was, just coming back and whatnot. And I did love the gallery. And I was, obviously grasping on the concept of why are we, why this gallery exists and what is the values and the mission of the gallery and all that. And there's a reason, she kind of talked to me about owning the gallery, and I, studied the financial statements of the gallery, and I did my business planning and all of that. And I decided that, yeah, that's something I can do. And university, I thought to myself, this is exactly what I thought. I thought, I can go to university any day of my life. I can be whatever age, but I'm never going to regret saying I owned an art gallery when I was 24, and I still stand by that. It's pretty awesome. So yeah, I bought the art gallery in 2019, and I moved to town here. I currently live in Turner Valley and work in Black Diamond. And as I said, I think I'm the only Syrian in town. And I love my community dearly. And I, it feels like it's home. For the longest time, I was afraid that this is not going to feel like home, but Canada feels like home, to the point where, soon I'll be headed to Jordan to see the family, because I haven't seen my dad in maybe 8 years now, and or 9. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to be leaving home to go on visits and come back, which is, belonging is very important. And thankfully I do feel belonging. It's wonderful. And yeah, so currently I co-own and operate a gallery in Black Diamond. And I work with the Economic Development Committee here in town, Intermunicipal Economic Development Committee, to, grow our small town. And yeah, I think that's about it. I would be interested to hear some of the questions. There's a lot to the story. I can go on for hours, but you have things to do. So I'll take some questions, and I'm sure stories will come out of it.
Anybody have any questions for him? Eric, why don't you talk about, like, where is your family now? Or like, are they safe, or do they live freely?
Yes. So family right now is kind of between Syria. Dad's in Syria, mom's in Jordan. They are, mom, of course, Jordan is pretty safe, and mom is married to a Jordanian. So she's, becoming more, she became a citizen there. So she's good. My dad's in Syria. There are good days and bad days. Some days there's an explosion and we call and make sure that he's not near there. And some days some weeks or months there's nothing going on and it's all good. And I see a question here that says, what do you think is Syria's future? And it's kind of, yeah, so it's one of those things where we don't really know. People are kind of, sometimes they say we're living from the lack of death, which is very harsh. And I don't know if, like, living from the lack of death is that we're lacking everything, that we're continuing to live because there's lack of death in the country. So it's kind of tough. It's pretty tough to put it in perspective. When the vaccines started coming out, when the COVID thing started, I remember that people were dying on daily basis. My dad would call me and say, so and so died and so and so died. And I remember my dad calling me and saying, I got a vaccine today. And I said, what kind of vaccine? And he said, it's called Sinopharm vaccine. And I said, hey, I haven't heard of that. So I looked up the World Health Organization and I found that it's the Chinese vaccine. And it's effective. I think it says online 60% or something. And I said, hey, Dad, like, this is not, why would you take that? Like, wouldn't you have to wait until you get maybe, Pfizer or something that's more approved or 90% approved or something? And he said, we don't have that privilege that you have. Like, we got to get whatever we can. And that's not the only thing. I mean, a lot of things are pretty tough. I think people are kind of dependent on their relatives that are living abroad to help them. Most of the people who don't have outside support kind of I don't know how they're surviving. Lots are dying from cold weather, from starvation, from a lot of things. But in terms of the future, we don't really know. I kind of personally lost hope when it comes to the revival of the country. It's been now 12 years or 11 years since the war, and we've been saying, oh, something is going to change. Something's going to change. Every month we say that, but right now I don't think anything is going to change. Things are pretty bad. And there's no people, like, there's no guys in Syria. Everyone did like I did, and they ran away. A lot of them went to Jordan. A lot of them went to Egypt, to, of course, Europe is full. Canada has quite a bit. So apparently Syria right now, if you will go, it's a lot of just lots of women and children. And when the guys turn 17, they run away because they don't want to join the army like I did, which is pretty terrifying to have to. And then the army service used to be 2 years, and I think now it's 8 years. So who wants to spend 8 years of their life fighting for a cause they don't believe in? So it's pretty much, I think there's not going to be a change for a while. If that answers the question. Thank you for the question. Sharon, please go ahead.
How did you become so terribly proficient in English?
Oh, well, I'm glad you think so. Thank you. I spoke some English before I come here, and it was from, learning from movies and TV shows and songs, all sort of things that I could. And even I would read books, and I would kind of mark on the books, translate the words, and try to, translate a whole page and read it again in English without looking at the Arabic words. I would put tape on the TV when I'm watching movies on the subtitles, to hide them and be able to try to understand. And when I came here, I really worked on it hard. So if I'm having a conversation with you, Sharon, I would, if you said a word I don't know, I'm not trying to interrupt you and say, hey, what does this mean? And then I would try to use that word, of course, many times in our next conversation. So the first time, a few weeks ago, actually, I learned the word gregarious, and I had to use it. And it doesn't slide into a conversation, gregarious. So I had to use it on a dinner, and yeah, that's how I kind of developed my language. And thankfully at this point, I feel like I'm more fluent than I ever was.
Sharon, I can tell you my experience of him when we were first chatting a number of years ago, and he was talking about his job at Starbucks in downtown Calgary and how some people would come in, daily, sometimes even twice a day, and, buy $4, $5, $6 coffees. And that he was just really struggling coming from this, really tough background to a place that just felt so ostentatious sometimes. And I thought, well, he just said ostentatious. I think he'll be just fine speaking.
Yes, I would think that I was learning that word, so I've used it a lot.
Well, it worked on me.
So someone asked a question saying,
Yeah.
I would like to ask, what is the one thing that you learned in your life and that helped you the most? And that's a really good question. It's really big question, but I think I have the answer for me being is that for me it was just putting myself out there in terms of that we're all people in a way. So moving from one country to the other, you realize that these people are really just like you. Don't act like a stranger and you won't be treated like one. I kind of, let me just think about how I want to put this. Is that, in terms of discrimination, for example, I personally, thankfully, discrimination exists everywhere, but thankfully I have always found that when I'm, looking at the people in the eye and when I'm being genuine and I'm sharing my story and contributing and not being a stranger, I won't be treated like one. And even coming to rural Alberta, to a small town Alberta that has never seen a refugee ever, maybe, I'm not sure. I kind of, felt like I am a good fit. I fit in, and who would have thought? And I had situations where I would be looked at as a stranger, but as soon as you look at someone in the eye and shake their hands firmly and introduce yourself and be genuine, and no one is going to look the other way, I don't think. So that's what helped me, is that I've always kind of seen the other side and try to gain that trust and gain that love and gain that belonging through just being, gregarious, I guess. Do you still have a violin? That's a good question. When I came to Canada, I didn't bring my violin with me because I was, I had a lot of things. But what happened is actually the people who I stayed with, bless their heart, plus someone I see here on camera, Marika, one of the people on camera with us today, is that they secretly did some hunting and they found a violin and they fixed it up and they went through a lot of places and they fixed it for me. And on my welcome party here, which happened in Calgary, they said, okay, back up a little bit. I didn't bring my violin because I had 10 kilograms of Arabian sweets with me, because I thought all these people at the airport, I need to give them sweets. So I couldn't fit the violin in my bag and I left it home because, I wanted to give gifts. So they said at the welcome party, they said Tarek left his violin home because he wanted to bring us all Arabian sweets. So we got him a violin, and they pulled it out of under the bench and they presented it. So I still have it. I do have one right now. Yeah, thankful to the people who helped me get one. Thanks for your question. Any other questions?
I was just wondering, we're having, Canada has in the last little while, we've had Syrian new Canadians and now Afghanistan new Canadians, and we're going to get Ukrainian new Canadians. And I know you were saying that your experience was great. What one thing, Tarek, can you think of it would be even greater if, the immigration process or the welcoming to Canada, it was great, but it would be even greater? What can we do for our new Canadians?
Yes, that's a really good question. And I think of that quite often, is that when I came here, one of the most important thing was that I got approached by so many Syrians or Arabs and said, oh, come belong to our society. And I said, no, no, no. As much as I would, love to, it's familiar, right? The familiar is very easy to go to. I kind of chose not to, and I kind of stayed. I wanted to meet the people I meet that come my way. I don't want to go to my tribe, as they say. So I think it's very important that we connect with newcomers, and that newcomers learn about what we do as Canadians on a daily basis. Excuse us over here, we're wrapping a painting. Someone just bought a painting, so there's some noise, but hey, we made a sale. That's okay. So what I would say is I watched a movie recently, and it's talking about Syrians coming to Canada, and it's showing what they go through when they come to Canada, and it mostly was negative. And I think one of the most important things that newcomers should see or should try is to try to do the things that Canadians do. So I went skiing recently, and I did skating, and I just was able to merge into the society the proper way. I didn't escape by being with my tribe, playing cards and smoking and trying the things that we do that we're familiar with, but to merge into the bigger society. Although being with your people of your country feels good because they are, because you know them, you know the language. But I would say just be patient with a newcomer, and invite them over to try the things that you do, and just show them that part of your life that they may not have done before, like visiting an art gallery. I wasn't necessarily artsy. I don't know if I would have come to an art gallery myself alone, but right now it's all I do because I own one, and I love it. So it really creates a life for them. It's very like when I said earlier, my advice for people who come here is that they shouldn't be strangers. And when you act like a stranger, you're going to be treated like one. But at the same time, I recognize that it's hard not to be a stranger when you see a lot of negativity on the news and everywhere, and you don't realize that this is not necessarily true, that people are not like that, that the people who you see on social media or on the news are a small fraction of what the wonderful people are that you are going to be surrounded by. And even the ones who might have some stereotypical ideas, you can change their minds, and you can prove to them that not all their fingers are the same. So that would be my answer. Thank you for the question. And yeah, I see. Will your father or other members of your family come to Canada for a visit? I'm not sure. It was a subject that we have discussed a lot of times, but I was just saying to Nancy that I think that integrating and merging into society when you are 20 is much easier than when you're 60 and you don't speak the language. My dad speaks zero English, and I don't want ever to force him onto something because I think it's true, because I think is right. So it's kind of, the idea is there, and if they ever want to come to Canada, I'll offer the help and support if I can. But nothing is set in stones. My mom was here though a few months back. I'm just gonna move to the other room so I allow someone to wrap the painting here. No worries, it's okay. Selling paintings is good. We have other offices, so I can sit somewhere else. Yes, excuse me, sorry. So my dad might, if they ever decide to come to Canada, I would, I would love it myself, but I don't think it's an easy adjustment. I think to leave everything you grew up with and you're familiar with just to move to another country is not an easy task. So yeah, that would be the answer. Thank you for such an inspiring life story. I will never forget you. Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for saying that. So, and I just want to, thank everyone for attending the talk today. It's just so delightful and wonderful to see that, all these people are interested in hearing the story. And as I said, I hope that for those of you who've never been to Blue Rock Gallery, please come on home for a visit. If you able to, we'd love to see you and meet you and tell you more stories in person and say hello to you in person. And it was a really pleasure to chat with you all. Any other questions before I leave? Okay, Nancy, you have the floor, I guess.
But I was actually just reminded of, well, you commented earlier that you were thankful in this process of the demonstration of empathy to you. And I was reminded of a story you told me a couple of years ago now of um, a person with limited hearing coming into the art gallery and you being kind of frustrated that, you know, you couldn't help them. I will give you all, I won't even give you, let you guess. So he decided to learn sign language so that if that happens again, he can help them. And I think, if I recall correctly, too, supported his staff in learning that as well. So really just so very remarkable. And I will be, really forever grateful to Chris and Dirk for introducing me to him. And yeah, Tarek, your story never ceases to amaze me. You and your family have experienced, so many hardships, and yet you find a way to keep so very hopeful and positive. It's really quite remarkable. So I will thank everybody for joining us today, and come back on Monday if you would like to hear a Holocaust survivor and a woman who had a premature baby speak. Is that all for everybody today? Anything else?
Well,
All
thank
right.
you all. Thank you
Thank
for the
you all for
comment.
coming.
Thanks.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Nancy.